Good evening and welcome to the regular board meeting of the Board of Directors of the Bellevue School District. Today is Thursday, March 23rd, 2023, and the time is 4:30 p.m. At this time, we'll do roll call.
Jay Norris.
Christine Chu.
Seema Sarafan,
Joyce Shuey.
Carolyn Watson.
Superintendent Art Jarvis.
thank you. I believe we have a student tonight who is going to be introduced by our executive director.
Thank you, President Serafin. And tonight, happy to have Rashida Bhattacharjee. She is a 10th grade student at International, and her proud dad, Rajib, is in the back there. So Rashida, come on up and welcome to the school board meeting.
Hello. Hello. So, Rashida, I understand you're going to be leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Is that right?
Yep.
And the land acknowledgement? Okay, we're ready. So we will follow you as soon as you're ready.
Okay. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We acknowledge that we are on the indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples who have reserved treaty rights to this land, specifically the Duwamish and Snoqualmie tribes. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial. We reflect on the historic context that brings us to reside on this land and accept responsibility to interrupt erasure. We commit to an ongoing partnership with the Snoqualmie tribe as we listen to, learn from, and lead with their guidance.
Thank you. So we would love to hear from you in terms of your update. Thanks.
Dear members of the Bellevue School District Board, I'm honored to be standing before you today to share my story about how education has impacted my life in a profound way. My name is Rashida Bhattacharjee, and I'm a sophomore in this district. I am here today to express my gratitude towards this institution and how it has shaped me into the person I am today. As a child, I was fortunate to have parents who instilled in me the importance of education. They always reminded me that education was the key to unlocking endless opportunities in life, and so I took their advice to heart and worked hard in school, hoping that one day I would be able to make a difference in this world. Throughout my years in the Bellevue School District, I had some remarkable teachers who not only imparted knowledge, but also inspired me to pursue my dreams. They encouraged me to think creatively and to never give up. These teachers taught me that learning is not just about memorizing facts and figures, but it is about exploring the world around us and understanding it better. It was during my time in high school these past 2 years that I realized how privileged I was to have access to quality education. I was aware that millions of children around the world do not have access to basic education, and that thought weighed heavily on me. I knew I wanted to do something to make a difference. And so I decided to start a nonprofit organization called Shiksha, which means education in Hindi. Shiksha aims to provide underprivileged children in India with access to education by structuring curriculums fit for all students and providing tutoring to those who cannot afford it. My mission is to ensure that every child has the opportunity to learn and grow just like I did in the Bellevue School District. My experience in the Bellevue School District has taught me the value of education and how it can transform lives. It has also taught me the importance of giving back to society and making a positive impact in the world. I firmly believe that education is not a privilege but a basic right that every child deserves. I am grateful to the Bellevue School District for giving me the tools and skills I need to pursue my dreams. Without the education I receive here, I would not be standing before you today, sharing how much I have grown as a person. I would like to thank the Bellevue School District for shaping me into the person I am today. I'm proud to be and continue to be a product of this district and will always cherish the memories and lessons I learned here. I hope that my story for my passion for education inspires others to make a difference in their communities and to give back to society. Education is the key to unlocking a brighter future, and it is up to us to ensure that every child has access to it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, at this time, we share the acknowledgements are also going to be projected on screen. This is Gender Equity Month. It's Women's History Month. It's National Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. It's Youth Art Month. It's Music in Our Schools Month, and it's National Deaf History Month. Okay, with that, we move to item 1.7, which is approval of our agenda. I asked for a second for my motion to approve the agenda. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Okay, hearing no opposition, the motion carries. Our agenda for tonight is approved. And now I ask for a second to my motion to approve the consent agenda.
Seconded.
Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Okay, is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, hearing no opposition, the motion to approve the consent agenda carries. We now hear from our superintendent, Dr. Art Jarvis, regarding, I see a hand up. Director Chu?
Yeah, can we just spend like 10 seconds to just acknowledge, to directly acknowledge the comments of our student. I know we don't usually comment and have like a dialogue, but I just like either of any of us, I like that's a phenomenal thing that she's done.
Yeah.
And she gave a lot of credit to the schools. She gave credit to her family. And I just want to make sure that we give credit to her because she took the opportunity to do that. She's taking the opportunity to talk about it. She's taken the opportunity to make those things happen. And I think we all probably agree, but we just
We do. We don't
process is
usually
that
distinguish
we don't
between the
comment, but
students.
that was
who
a very
speak to us.
significant
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Thank you for what you are doing for our community and thank you for sharing the credit, but please make sure you take your credit too, because that's really special. Thank you.
Thank you. And Rashida, one thing we often will say is we'd love for you to stay for the whole meeting, but you don't need to feel that you need to. So we know that you have other things to do. So if you leave, we will not be offended. So thank you. Don't feel trapped here. Okay, so Superintendent Jarvis.
Thank you, President Serafan. The superintendent update only lists the one item, and that'll be the majority of my report. But before I begin that, I wanted to give a very brief follow-up to last week's approval of the consolidation plan and ask Deputy Superintendent Eva Collins and incoming Superintendent Kelly Aramaki to give a very brief overview of what's next and where we are and what's in the works. So Deputy Superintendent Collins, would you give an overview of implementation?
Certainly. Thank you, Dr. Jarvis. I'll give just a brief overview. Let's see. There we go. As you know, we have regional implementation teams that have been set up, and these teams have been meeting weekly for the purpose of coordinating efforts for a smooth and positive transition for all schools involved in the consolidation. And our executive director, Heather Edland, is our executive sponsor, and she also is enlisting the help of several district staff supporting the effort. Each school has stakeholder representation, and the critical criteria play an important role in communication, engagement, and decision-making. And what I mean by that is that the schools know their communities and already have systems in place for communication, outreach, and engagement. They know how to tap into their communities and will do so throughout the process. For example, the Eastgate team met with their family engagement specialists to ask, are there families we are not yet fully engaging, and how can you help us reach them? We have focus groups for some of our subgroups, like families with students served in the Olympic program or advanced learning, or families residing at Mary's Place. But we know that there are other families for whom we have not yet reached. And so we're making a concerted effort at the school level to do so. We intend to continue some level of engagement and monitoring throughout the school year, and we expect that these teams to play a role in designing how that might look. This week, we're working on what the regional team is working on, what training will staff need, and when should that training happen. So trying to decide, what kinds of things would we need. So we heard from Eastgate, for example, that there's a level of training that the gen ed teachers will need as part of their inclusion model. And so what specifically is that training, and when would staff like that to happen? There are 4 general areas that these regional teams are exploring. One is structural. So what are all the things that need to be in place in the facilities or the moving plan? One is symbolic. What about our mascots and our traditions and our community events? Putting these things on the calendar to make sure that all families are aware and included. Human resources is the third one. What does the staffing look like, and what are the things that are in our collective bargaining agreements that we need to follow? And the fourth one is is called political, and really that's John Harrison has been working with PTSAs to determine, so how do now we combine our PTSAs, and what are some of the things that we need to keep in mind? In terms of communications, our principals are doing weekly newsletters to update staff and community on what's happening in the regional teams. That's one thing that's been happening, are the regional implementation teams. Another thing is the open transfer process. We had a special open transfer process that was launched on March 10th to allow families from consolidated schools an opportunity to request an alternative placement for their child if they desired. The window closed on Monday, March 20th, and 264 requests were received. The process for placement was conducted over the next 2 days and was completed last night, with approximately 87% of the 264 requests approved. All of the Wilburton requests were approved, and 72% of the Eastgate requests were approved. We just had some that we could not approve with requests going to Somerset. Finalizing these open transfer requests is important in order to now adjust our staffing at each school and begin the process of staff assignments. In addition, we have several work teams that are underway to carry out some important next steps. So some of the work groups include work communications, working on communication flow. So we know that our schools that are consolidated have received a lot of information, but the larger district has not. And so how can we improve the communication flow, make sure that that all people are aware and included? And then staffing, working on the details of staffing and adherence to contract requirements. Transportation, looking at start times or childcare. And just the fourth one is logisticals related to the facilities. We've also been really busy making reductions in central office as expected, as part of the plan that the board approved last week. The reductions at this point are personnel decisions. These decisions are very difficult, as you can imagine. And however, we're starting with central office reductions in order to minimize the impact on schools. And Dr. Aramaki will say more about that.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, board. So just related to that, just wanted to share a little bit about kind of how we're approaching looking at the remainder of the budget cuts that we need to make. It was the chart that was listed at our last meeting, because we know that we have a significant number of dollars that we have to cut from our budget in addition to the consolidations. And so just a couple things I wanted to share about that. We are following some guiding principles around making those decisions, and so these are just examples of the guiding principles that we're looking at the cuts through. One is prioritizing cuts furthest away from the classroom. So as Eva Collins mentioned, starting with central office, we were projecting about $2 million in cuts. We're aiming to double that to about $3 or $4 million in cuts from central office staffing, particularly at the administrative level, and then looking at operational costs. So prioritizing cuts furthest away from the classroom. Second, focusing on things like materials and supplies that don't have to do with direct student services or staffing. We are trying to preserve services that directly affect students, particularly in light of post-pandemic needs. We've done significant community engagement around the strategic planning and pandemic recovery planning. And so from the things that we've learned from community through those things, we're using some of those as priorities for us to look at when we look at budget cuts. So Those priorities are mental health, student well-being, academic intervention, equitable opportunities and outcomes for students, our equity investments in Title I schools, graduation success, and support for families. So those are some of the areas that have already been prioritized by community that we're looking at as we look at budget cuts. We're also then attending to contractual and legal requirements, and then maximizing efficiencies across the system as much as possible. And so those are kind of the principles that are guiding our decisions around the remaining budget cuts. And then as we have more information about that, we will be sharing it with you as well as with the community.
Thank you, Dr. Almaki. And we wanted to give both the community and the board that very brief and high-level overview that there is a lot of activity. As we move into the annual plan progress report, I think over the years, you see some things change in terms of priorities and whether or not it happens to be an era that's more attentive to one area or another. One that never changes is academic success, the core of the school system, the core of the plan, and in many ways, the core of the identity of the Bellevue School District. So it is our pleasure to now present, and I'm going to reintroduce Deputy Superintendent Eva Collins. I can attest that this plan has been her livelihood for many weeks and all hours of the day and night to try to make sure this could be presented. So I want to hand it to Deputy Superintendent Eva Collins.
As you know, this academic progress is a point in time. There will be a summary progress report, our annual plan report that will be provided at this summer at the end when all of our data is in. But I would like to introduce, Patty, are you going to be first or Heather? Okay, Heather Sanchez, Executive Director Heather Sanchez, and Executive Director Dr. Patty Sigworth.
Got it. Okay. All right. Good evening, board. Heather Sanchez, Executive Director of Schools. I'm here with Patty Sigworth, and we're going to provide just a brief update to the academic progress report. And of course, you have the full written report. We have just a few brief slides, and then we'll take any questions that you have with the remaining time that we have for the end of our portion. Okay, next slide, please. So when we look at our progress towards our goals, what you see on the left are the targets, and on the right-hand side of the chart is our status as of our mid-year data collection. So for our early literacy target, our annual plan target at mid-year, we are on track to meet that. And so the specific data points are within the full report, but we are on track for that particular goal for our annual plan. Middle years literacy, there's a slight difference with, and Patty will talk a little bit more about that, but the cadence with which our secondary schools gather data, they don't always have mid-year data, elementary does, and she'll talk a little bit more about what data they are using. So there's end of year data coming for middle school, so that's why you see that comment there about data coming EOY. For math, for preparation for algebra, this includes elementary and secondary schools. And so for fifth grade, we are on track to reach our annual plan target at our mid-year data collection, and that's our STAR math assessment for elementary school. And similarly for secondary, their STAR administrations are beginning of year BOY and end of year EOY, so they don't have that mid-year data point, and they're instead utilizing interim assessments, which Patty will speak a little bit more to. And then for college and career ready, we are on track to meet that target. So that's the brief overview of where we are at the mid-year point relative to our targets. All right, next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the key strategies that we're currently implementing, and then Patty will talk some more about them as well. I do want to acknowledge that we appreciate your feedback and your questions from earlier this week. Patty and I have received those, and we had an opportunity to review all of them. So we're going to thread some of our responses into the slide that you have in front of you. So some of the key strategies that we're implementing relative to our academic goals, there was a question about professional development, capacity building, and how it's threaded throughout our system. So I'll just speak to that just a little bit with this slide. So one of our key efforts around nested capacity building has been through the way in which we're providing professional development for our leaders and the educators in our system. So all of our certificated administrator professional development, which just for your reference occurs once a month, and it's for about 4 hours in the afternoon once a month. All of that is focused on cycles of continuous improvement in literacy and math. And that has been the case actually for the last 2 years. And so we've been able to really deepen our practice around how we think about a cycle of continuous improvement. And that is for all of our certificated administrators. So that's one of our key improvement levers and also capacity building measures. And we've been working really hard on improving our practices with regard to the science of reading. So you can see there that there's some language around enhancing our literacy practices with the science of reading, planning with and using complex text to ensure that all students have access to grade level standards and content. I do want to say that we still have plenty of work to do in this area, but we are really proud of the work that has happened thus far. Specifically, we have more universal use of some of the resources like Hegarty and some of our UFly materials, and we have cohorts of teachers going through letters training. So that's still very much a work in progress, but we've made a lot of progress in this area, particularly with regard to our science of reading. And then this is our second year with the implementation of illustrative math. And so we are really focusing on fidelity of implementation across all of our schools that are utilizing the resources. I am proud to say it's remarkably consistent compared to when you consider we're in year 2 of implementation. So we continue to focus on fidelity of the implementation of the resources alongside the implementation of language routines that go with that. And then at the secondary level, which Patty will expand on, we're piloting new secondary mathematics curriculum for Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. So with regard to the capacity building structures, we have our certificated administrators, and then similarly, all of our building-based professional development and district-based professional development also has focused on the same themes of cycles of continuous improvement and literacy and math, supporting our educators and our teams of educators. So it's been a thread through every level of the system. And so Patty will now expand on some more of the secondary specific pieces. So next slide, please.
Thank you. Recognizing the need to build the capacity of our teachers who are closest to the point of implementation with our students, and the need to differentiate at a much greater level with fidelity at the secondary level, we went deep in a couple areas. Math, heavy focus, rightfully so. We are utilizing math instructors at each of our secondary schools in collaboration with central office support staff to plan and implement the administration of the interim assessments, and more importantly, the analysis of the data, and then what's going to happen that's going to be different in the classroom for the kids to ensure a greater proficiency levels. Our building leaders do serve as part of those teams as the data is analyzed and as shifts in practices and instruction are contemplated and implemented. As Heather was saying, we have been working much more collectively and collaboratively with groups. So our ITCLs are joining all of our administrative meetings. Our administrators in the building are joining the professional development of the staff and the teachers, so that there's just a common understanding, common goal, and common focus. One of the things that we've done this year to address limited access to professional development is we've tried to incorporate much of this work in the regular school day, whether that be during planning times, release times, PLC work. So we have a captive audience, and it's not hit and miss who's involved in that work. That has been an issue in the past. and we deliberately addressed that this year. To further address the gaps that we have in proficiency in math, we do have several middle schools that are heavily immersed in utilizing tutoring programs. Some of those are happening during the school day, some outside the school day. Some are provided by school staff and some are provided by tutoring agencies. I think one of the pieces that we really doubled down on this year was family engagement as a partner in this work, and it's paying off immensely. The other piece that's made a difference is allowing flexibility in the school communities to collaboratively develop a plan that meets the needs of their kids and their families versus a one-size-fits-all. When it relates to literacy, this year we have had routine and consistent use of Lexia Power Up. It's a classroom-based program and it's aligned to the science of reading. This has occurred for every sixth grader and for select seventh and eighth graders, and it's happening during the day. You'll note in the appendix some promising results that we're seeing in movement of some of the zones of school skill development. We've used Lexia Power Up in the past. It's been teacher dependent and in some cases optional for students. Doing it during the regular school day is giving access to every student in our system. Startling increases in chronic absenteeism, K-12, has resulted in a shift of our focus for MTSS teams, building and district-wide. And in all honesty, we are realigning our resources, time, people, and money to address it. Yes, the trend, it does align with the national trends, but it is very concerning. Currently, and in the last 3 months, we've been identifying and addressing the primary issues that are impacting absenteeism of groups of students and of individual students. In all honesty, it's one of our highest priorities to have the students in school or in settings that meet them where they are. We're working very closely with families. While we anticipated post-pandemic that we would see an increase in chronic absenteeism, the increase is much higher than we anticipated. And again, that's aligned to national trends. And it does impact many facets of a student's life. Next slide. We're happy to take any questions that you have and jot those down and get back to you.
I believe Director Aris had a question.
We've used up the time to stay on the schedule. We'll be happy to take questions and get answers back to the board as quickly as possible. But if you wish to extend, that's.
Yeah, I know we have public comment. I think that there's a couple, I think, maybe things on the table. One is because it's such an important report. I think what I'm going to suggest is, and I want to get input from board directors, we can either continue this and just delay our public comment by 10 minutes, or we can carry it over till after our public comment. But I think if we don't have the answers now, then I would ask that we maybe bring this back at the next meeting, just so that we're able to share with those who are also participating and listening what kinds of answers we're getting. So I think that's one of our work in progress opportunities. So Director Aris?
We could do the public comment first and come back to this. That's fine with me.
Okay, let me see what other directors think. Director Watson, Director Chu says yes. Vice President Shuey, thoughts?
Public comment at the time that we
Okay.
specified.
Okay, I do know, so we can extend a little bit. I do know there are hard stops. Our board meeting should be ending at 7:05 p.m. I know I'm aware of 1 or 2 hard stops that are around the 7:30 mark, but I think that would still allow us not to go over. So I think that would work. Okay. Sorry. All right, so that concludes your presentation. We'll come back to questions after public comment. Okay, let's turn to that now then. Can I ask our board coordinator where we are on public comment?
We have 7 people who pre-registered. I believe all of them are here. So we will have them speak first. They're all in the room with us today. If you are online and want to make public comment tonight in one of our few open spots, please use the raise hand button. And if you're in the room and you haven't come talk to me already, please do so.
Okay, so at this time, I'm going to invite those who are in the room to make sure they're coordinated with our board coordinator, Hannah Worth. And I will also ask you to look at what's on screen for the public comment guidelines. And then I will additionally just give you a little bit of a summary. So first, this is our time, and we're trying to really honor it, 5 p.m., our time during our board meetings where we receive public comment. The full guidelines are obviously projected, but what we want you to know is you can also communicate with us by email or voicemail. But let's start with our gratitude for receiving public comment because we appreciate your thoughtful input. Because of the limitations of our board calendar and to ensure we can maximize the number of people from whom we hear in this public setting, we have limited public comment to 20 minutes and therefore limited remarks from each person to 2 minutes. We will listen to all your comments carefully, but we generally don't respond. And there are a variety of reasons for that. We expect all of our speakers to engage in behavior that we consider civil and not in any forms of communication that would be identified as unacceptable. The full list is on screen, but those include slander and libel, invasion of privacy, obscenities, and harassment, intimidation, bullying, or discrimination. But we also are limited in accepting public comment on anything that's a pending investigation involving student discipline, allegations of employee misconduct, or any kind of allegation of discrimination or harassment in order to preserve our ability to hear appeals. We also just remind you that we don't therefore hear complaints in public regarding employee misconduct. So back to our first comment, we thank you, and we want you to know that while we are listening intently, we generally do not respond to comments in this setting. So with that, Ms. Worth, if you could please call the name of our first speaker.
That'll be Michael Smith.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Michael Smith, and I am the Development Director at the Bellevue Schools Foundation. For those who don't know, the foundation is independent of the school district, but basically it's my job to raise money for certain programs within the district. I've worked in education for 20 years, and I've been with the foundation for the last 2. I'm deeply impressed with the quality of education and the people in the Bellevue School District. The outcomes of this district are superlative within our state and our nation. We're fortunate to have such high quality educators who care about students and are constantly finding ways to innovate and to improve. And I feel fortunate to get to work with many of those people. The Bellevue School District is facing a revenue challenge, like many other school districts in our state and our nation. Funding a public school of over 18,000 students is a complex enterprise. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind our community that we can continue to have great outcomes for all of our students, despite falling revenue from the state. If you're concerned about preserving what's great about Bellevue School District, I encourage you to learn and support the work that the Bellevue Schools Foundation is doing. For over 40 years, the foundation has stepped in to fill gaps in state funding and pilot important innovative programs that make the education of our district a step above what you may find at many other districts. I'd also like to invite everyone to join us at our Spring for Schools fundraiser on April 1st at the Maidenbauer Center. Money that we raise this year will directly impact students next year, like support for mental health, computer science, early learning, and many other programs. So I encourage you to join us and support our students and educators through the Bellevue Schools Foundation. We're grateful for your support and hope you can join us on April 1st. Thank you.
Thank you.
First, Jane and Christine, thank you for doing the hard work. Thank you for listening and hearing our concerns, and thank you for working tirelessly to find ways to avoid causing irreparable damage to our children and our community. To the district team that wrote the proposal and the 3 board members who so quickly voted in support of ripping apart friendships, shipping our youngest learners across the city with the goal of gifting our school building to a choice school, shame on you. It is absolutely appalling that you, Seema, Joyce, and Carolyn, voted in favor of making our children the sacrificial lambs in this horrendous, inequitable consolidation plan. The district failed to do its job. They chose the easy way out. In fact, at last week's meeting, it was even stated that it would, and I quote, be too difficult to share the burden. Too difficult? Too difficult to do your job and ensure equity? Too difficult to take 1 year and address the myriad of concerns and solutions presented by this community? Too difficult? I raised my child to take on challenges and not shy from them. I teach her that the easy way out is almost never the best option, and yet that is exactly what this district and you 3 board members chose to do. Even R. Maki acknowledged via email that our children, and I quote, bear a disproportionate amount of the burden. Seriously? This is how you view the proposal that was presented and subsequently approved? You knew going into this that it was inequitable and unjust, and you continued to push it through because, let me guess, it was too difficult to do otherwise. I, for one, am disgusted. I am heartbroken that our youngest learners, children under the age of 11, are being forcibly removed from the loving communities to make your jobs easier. When we first heard about these school closure plans, so many people told me, don't waste your time speaking at the board. It won't do any good. They said it was a dog and pony show simply for you to check your boxes. I defended the district and the board. How naive I was then. This was nothing short of a dog and pony show. You rubber stamped a wholly inequitable proposal. You have failed the families, the teachers, and the children. You could have given us 1 more year. You could have given us 1 more year to fix your mess, but no, you voted in favor of placing all the burden on our youngest kids. You have made a disastrous decision, one that will haunt you and this district for years to come, because I will never forget nor forgive the abuse and the pain you have inflicted on our kids. You should be ashamed of yourself. Your support for this was unconscionable.
Thank you. Do we have the next speaker?
Hi, my name is Athena. I'm a sophomore, and this is my first year on the Newport Robotics Group. First, I just want to say thank you to our current shop space at the ESC West building and for our future shop at the Newport High School rebuild. The new on-campus shop will greatly increase accessibility to robotics students who don't have rides. So once again, thank you very much. Our team currently has 150 members with about 70 active members, all of whom do different things. Now, one of the major aspects of our team is outreach. One of the most notable achievements this year was working with Taiyi Middle School to develop 3 FLL robotics teams, with one of the teams even making it to state semifinals. They've been able to learn technical abilities like designing and programming, systems, and the iterative process, but also incredible knowledge through their own research on thermal pollution, electricity consumption, and more. These skills can take them so far in the workspace, which is why it's so important for us to start teaching them young. Having the chance to introduce these STEM opportunities to not only younger kids, but also young girls is important to give them opportunities that they might not otherwise have. However, one of the barriers we've had is space. This past year, we tried to start a team at Somerset Elementary, but there wasn't enough classroom space for us to hold an after-school activity. To address this, we're asking for a workshop for elementary and middle school robotics. With elementary schools being closed, we want to use some of the empty classrooms to increase the exposure of STEM to kids through FLL teams. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tyga. I'm a junior at Newport, and I'm the documentation and electrical lead for NRG. On the topic of space, we'd like with Samamish's robotics team, the Robotuds, we'd also like to promote sustainable makerspaces and a shared practice field for all teams in the Bellevue Alliance. The Bellevue Alliance is an organization that includes all high school robotics teams in BSD. We want to emphasize the importance of dedicated workspaces for teams as they help make teams more sustainable and equitable for all students. In the same way that athletics needs large fields to practice in, larger shared spaces are extremely beneficial to robot performance and reduces the load on individual teams to support their own fields. With that said, we'd like to propose that a gym in an elementary school that is being closed be repurposed as a shared practice space for all robotics teams in Bellevue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Enrica. I'm a sophomore at Newport, and I'm the electrical vice president of NRG. And I wanted to talk about how impactful robotics really is on our youth. On our team, we have 6 different subgroups: business, marketing, mechanical, programming, CAD, and electrical. And the skills students learn through these 6 different specialized groups is so important in helping them gain jobs, which is why we like to reach out and ask about developing internship pathways for skills learned through robotics or providing access to certifications. We want the efforts students are putting in now to pay off in the workspace and towards their future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Taylor. I'm the Chief Technical Officer of the Newport Robotics Group, and I'm also a senior at Newport High School. So you've been hearing a lot about what our team's been doing this year, but I want to talk to you about the game. So this year's game is Energize, which focuses on sustainable energy. And last week, our team actually won the Team Sustainability Award at our competition in Bonnie Lake. Even though sustainable energy and team sustainability are kind of different, they both focus on sustainability. So it's like, how do we make a future for ourselves, and how do we keep like a future before things go up in flames? So I took a look at the sustainability plan that I think you guys are reading soon, and reading one of the 4 pillars being student voice. Our team would love to be a part of shaping the policy language and also procedure creation, and we'd also love to help develop sustainability plans in districts across the state. And sustainability is one of the core influences in robotics, both for FLL students who are learning about taking care of our environment through research projects, but also because we're shaping our future engineers. And if we can teach them about sustainability, then they can bring that into the workplace. To summarize, we'd like to ask for our dedicated workspace for elementary and middle school robotics team, a field space for all high school robotics teams in Bellevue, to share a STEM internship pathway for robotics, as well as the opportunity to work with the Bellevue School District Board in order to develop the BSD sustainability plan. Last but not least, we'll be competing this weekend at Sammamish High School, and we'd love to invite you guys to come with your friends, family, kids, to come watch and see what that's about. And also, if you are by our workspace ESC West across the street, then please stop by and come see what we spend 30 hours each week doing. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to interrupt really quick here just to say that I do have more walk-in commenters than I do have spots. So I'm going to use a random number generator, and I'll put the names that the generator chooses up on the slide as Megan is talking. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Megan Wyman. I'm a parent of a dual language student at Sherwood Forest Elementary. So I've been participating in the school consolidation process since I first found out about it, which was in January. I just want to take the time to recognize where we are and to reflect. I do want to say I recognize that the school district has tried their best. The activities that you guys have had in the past year, you have a new superintendent, you have financial considerations, there are wild state budget things that are happening. There's a pandemic that we're coming out of, and you have to act in a timely manner. I recognize all those things in isolation would have been a lot, but you're dealing with them all at the same time. It's a lot. I will say, and I want to echo just the rush process. I know you've heard it throughout. I want to assume positive intent from the school district, but it's hard to do that with kind of some of the way that activities rolled out, and it really felt like that the recommendations were set before we even really got started in the process, and it was a sunk cost and it wouldn't change. And it really felt like the outcomes were inevitable. So I was in Sherwood Forest open house. It almost was like the message came across was like, oh, no, Sherwood, you don't have to worry. And we didn't have to worry. And then with Ardmore, it did feel like there were comments that came out that they would have a program that was placed there and they wouldn't be part of the recommendations, which was the conclusion that came out.
And it really felt like critical criteria was not something that is where we started. It felt like it was an afterthought. It was applied after recommendations were provided. It wasn't something that was in the initial selection process. I would say too, going forward, what's the school district's plan for increasing revenue? How are you thinking about enrollment? How are you thinking about your families, working parents that you're trying to serve? I worry that this process might be detrimental to attracting more families to our district. And then lastly, my last thought, I know the timer just went off, but I really want to put something to the board, really about what your responsibilities are. Your responsibilities are around oversight, accountability, and governance. You need to reflect on this process. It's great that you have.
I'm sorry, but your time is up.
I'll finish my sentence. It's great that there's an agenda item around stakeholder engagement, but you need to have humility. That's not a core value of the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker.
Hello, my name is Joyce John, a junior student from Bellevue High School. I devoutly believe one of the most critical issues that the students of our generation will be facing is improving sustainability on Earth and respond to climate change. When I heard about the sustainability policy, I spontaneously compelled that I need to join to support this policy. It is important to students that we begin to learn about the concept of recycling in school and we turn that into our lifelong practice. Imagine this in the next 20 years, perhaps this generation of students, the 1,400 high schoolers in Bellevue High School will become adults who understand how crucial it is to reduce negative impact in our environment because of the sustainability education from school. In addition, they will influence their family and friends around them and their entire life period to consider the great value of sustainability practice. They will also influence the future society as individuals in creating safer environment for all. This is a monumental change. In order to create significant impact based on sustainability practice, we need participation from every individuals, and from children to elders to actively practice the habits such as recycling, decreasing carbon footprints, and minimizing waste. To achieve these goals, we must start at the fundamental, our education. The sustainability policy is indispensable to our district to take a huge step forward in creating a safer and greener planet for our students and staff. Thank you.
Thank you. I think next we have, is it William Chang?
Yes, William Chang.
Hi there, my name is William Chang, and I am a junior at Bellevue High School. I'm part of the Associated Student Body team at Bellevue High School, and I'm also outside of Bellevue High School, a sustainability ambassador for the Bellevue team. I'm here today because I'm a proponent for the sustainability policy for our school district because I think it's a really good step in what we're going towards as a school district and very important. On March 6th at Bellevue High School, we had a turn off the lights day where in a coordinated fashion, all the classrooms and kind of hallways and gyms had their lights turned off. And our goal with that was to see what type of measurable impact we could have with a turn off the lights day and our electricity savings. That day went really well. We had about 30% reduction in our peak electricity usage. And also we had about 25 kilowatts saving of electricity usage. And as you know, Ms. Serafon, upcoming, we have a Ditch the Drive Day, and that's a big priority for us with ASB and student groups at Bellevue High School who are interested in sustainability. And the problem here is that without a comprehensive district sustainability policy, it becomes very hard to connect these isolated initiatives because we want a mission statement that helps us guide our actions forward. So for example, Bellevue School District does not have any way to measure transportation emissions. The biggest problem here is that transportation emissions actually account from 40% to 60% of our emissions. So we're able to track how much electricity we spend, but that's super minute and granular compared to transportation, which is a bigger issue. And I believe that with a sustainability policy, we can actually solve this issue and figure out how much we're emitting with something like transportations and mobile combustions, and really figure out as a district how we can be more environmentally conscious. Additionally, this quarter for ASB, sustainability is a really, really big priority. But the problem is we feel like we're not getting that much backing because we know what we want to do, but it's hard to connect with other schools and make this a really big district-wide initiative. So I'd ask for all you guys to consider our sustainability policy and vote pro for the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have a person online.
We do. We have one online commenter tonight, and I just will clarify that there's two folks online that raised their hand, and a couple people in the room who signed up on the walk-in list. I used the random number generator to choose 3 people for the 3 open spots. So the last 2 in-person commenters and then our 1 online commenter. So everybody's whose name up on the slide, that's who's going to speak tonight, and that's the spots that we have. So Noel, I'm clicking the buttons to allow your camera and microphone, so you'll have to turn those on, but go ahead and do that and start talking.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
My name is Noel. I'm a lifelong resident of Bellevue. It's always an honor and a privilege to address the board and the school district. I know everyone in the school district, everyone in the city realizes we've had tough decisions. I think the focus now should be on next steps, especially in regards to proactively developing policies to increase enrollment in the Bellevue School District. I'm making public comment today because I'm helping neighbors in the West Summit and the Summit, many of whom are Asian immigrants. I was part of the immigration wave over 40 years ago, and many of my neighbors are part of a much more recent immigration wave. There are some logistical issues with the open transfer process, one of them being kids who are currently enrolled in private schools. Those private schools have commitment deadlines in April. You have to commit in April, and then you're liable for the next year of schools, the next year's tuition. If BSD has already made decisions on the open transfer applications, then if those parents can get notice before April, then they don't have to commit to their private schools and then become, liable for the tuition payments. And there are other options. It's an issue of contract law. The parents can retain attorneys. We can probably resolve the cases one by one, or just get one attorney to handle all of the private school contract clauses. But I think if the Bellevue School District can help the parents by rolling out the decisions much sooner, that would be helpful. Another item I wanted to discuss is helping the kids that make the transition. Kids from West Summit and the Summit applied for Somerset. It's much closer to home, but will be part of a new student body. So any helping with them transitioning would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. I think at this time we're going to, having ended public comment, Executive Director Harrison, do you have something you were going to share? Oh, okay. That's probably a good idea. I think we're going to go back to Superintendent Jarvis and pick up on where we were. This now ends our public comment. We're going to go back to, I think, where we were, which was there was going to be a question from Director Aris to, I believe, Ms. Sanchez, but I don't know. And I just want to make sure we pick up on that. And we will allot 15 minutes for this. I think we will probably need to think about if we run out of time, what we might do to bring this back. Dr. Jarvis.
I would just offer that to the staff. If we have an answer briefly, we can give it. If it's going to be a longer answer, we will get back to the board and with that answer. So you wanted about 10 minutes. Is that?
I thought 10 to 15 minutes.
We will hold it to brief answers.
Right.
Okay, I have a couple of clarification questions and also an ask. You said there are 4 pillars that you're moving as far as the consolidation, structure, moving, symbolic, human resource. Let's see, some of the things, huh? And political. My wonder is in the structure, if what that really means. I would like a little more clarification on that, and if that also includes an opportunity for Eastgate staff to go, especially the Olympic program, to go to Spirit Ridge and observe the building to make sure that it's not just the physical space, but the interaction of emerging of the two program. I am concerned about the needs of our Olympic students and the current structure the Spirit Ridge is, and it works for Spirit Ridge itself, but with this new program, how it's going to change and make sure that these students are safeguarded and it's a safe space for them. So I'd like to, I guess my big question is, how are you adjusting, and how is that part of your structure? If not, will you consider that? The other is, where is the student's voice in all of this? And I think, and that would, if you could elaborate on that, that'd be great. The other is regarding the transfers. I would like to know how many students are. You said 70% of the students from Eastgate are getting the transfer. I'd like to know what that number means, as well as we move forward. I also would like for you to keep us updated on what are the actual numbers of enrollment in these buildings. I think it would be good for us to keep. It would be good for us to be informed to see, as I know we have the understanding that based upon the demographer that the numbers will decrease, but with all the articles lately on COVID boom, baby boom, I like to see how that is being recorded and showing up.
Yeah, all right. So I'm getting the nod to go ahead. I'll add my questions because I think they're related. My big question on this is really, when I hear the pillars, they're very technical and very important, but I didn't hear a pillar around students, around families, around engagement, even around engagement of staff. Each of these things has aspects that takes care of a technical detail, but what I'd like to understand is what we're doing to build genuine community in these spaces and to really empower students, families, and staff to feel like they're part of things by being part of defining, not just being communicated to or a few people being represented. I suspect some of it's embedded in there, but I wonder, I guess, I'd like to learn more about it. And I wonder also if we might consider leading with the development of community as a pillar instead of as sort of an artifact of the technical work that has to be done, because that's part of what got us in trouble with this process in the first place. So I'd like to learn more about how we're going to transition the kids, not just visits, how we're going to really help them to be part of the community. The same thing for how families will become part of the community, and the same for staff. And staff may be more tricky because if the staff aren't being localized to just a couple of schools, we want to make a concerted effort to build community across all the schools that our staff are going to be going to. So that would be great to get an update on. I don't expect it on the spot, but I think it builds on what Jane was saying. Thank you. And I also have a thought / question on, as you think about the strategic plan piece on academic achievement, on student achievement. And that's really just thinking about, like, you know, as we look at this, there was a place where it said, well, we measured and 98 versus 97% of kids made progress from compared to last year in the middle of the year in passing grades. And as we learn from this strategic plan and we move to the next one, when you put the recommendations together at the end of the year, what's a better way for us to look at achievement together? What's a better set of things to focus on that are meaningful measurements, that aren't all just about statistics, that are about like whether or not our kids are learning in ways that are relevant and impactful for them, and if we're reaching each and every kid. So just something for us to think about together. Thank you.
I'm going to come back to you because Vice President Shui has her hand up next, but I know you have another question, so I'll come back. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you
Vice-
for all the work
yeah.
that's being. Can you hear me? So thank you to district staff for all the work that you've been doing the last several months and now immediately into the next phase of things. I wanted to echo something that Director Ara said earlier in terms of transparency and enrollment and a request to consider. What I've seen is that sometimes people didn't feel like they had the information. I myself did create my own spreadsheets with the help, and thank you to the community members who did provide me with some work there. So I took information that I got more in PDF or just sort of text form, and then I took information that was in Excel spreadsheets. I created my own. And I think that as far as transparency and in terms of enrollment numbers, it's public data, and that while we can each download the information from OSPI and put all of this together, that if we have a mechanism to provide like a link to that enrollment so that people can see how that is emerging and changing, that will be helpful in terms of both transparency and in terms of community understanding of the budget crises that we are facing and that we may continue to face. But that's just an ask to consider that. I know that there's probably a lot of technical and other kinds of issues that need to be considered, but I would like to ask for that because I think it will help all of us and be an efficient way to study the numbers. Thank you.
Okay, back to Director Aris, and then I have one when you're done.
Okay, one more. I do hope that the demographer is correct and that we're on the right path, but in case we're not, I do hope that we have a what if plan. So if we have a balloon of students in either Wilburton or in Spirit Ridge or in Woodridge, that we have a plan to deal with that extra student body that is not going to be just adding more portables, because that's not exactly the best route, I at least in my word thinking. So I would love for you guys to think ahead and have a backup plan just in case. Thanks.
I'll let you go next, Director Watson.
Okay, I had a few comments about the academic success report. And first I want to say thank you for working and coming up with strategies around the professional development, because that's been something that's concerning me. So I'm really glad to see that. So thank you for that and those strategies. What continues to concern me is on some pages of the report, we kind of see that their class grades don't really align to the STAR thing. And I worry because I think if that continues, what are the chances that we wind up graduating kids who got all 20.5 credits but didn't meet the standards that they needed to meet? So they might graduate without knowing what they need to know. So, and then I also worry in a technical sense that on one of the pages, I just had it up, throughout the report, we break down the things by groups, but it says like, oh, I think it's page 8. There's a little asterisk and says, we imputed a score to the advanced learning kids, but those kids are in these groups. So I wonder if that's masking some achievement or lack of achievement outside of the advanced learning program on the statistics there. Like if you average in a whole bunch of kids who have an imputed high score, maybe that makes the gen ed kids look better than they are. So we need to know, right? In case we need some interventions there. And then I wanted to draw your attention to something that I read yesterday. Maybe I can try to find how I can send it. But the Atlantic had an article on why kids don't enjoy reading and they don't read the way they used to. And they were saying that perhaps it's not like what we think it is, which is screen time and everything. Perhaps it's got to do with the way some of our curricula approach reading. So, I'm all behind this new science of reading stuff, but when you get past that decoding level and you're looking at text, I know it used to be sometimes you're analyzing text and it's just chunks of text, but you never get to that really fun part, where you're plot driven and you get to the end, and you're just devouring the book. So, hopefully you can incorporate some of that into the curriculum, but I don't know. I haven't seen it recently, what you're doing. But it brings me to the thought of library books in this time of budget cuts. So I would like to know, how are we funding library books in the district right now? Because I remember it used to be a great source of inequity because there were no budget per se, or not a lot of budget. And so PTAs and things used to, make up the gap. So a school that drew on a lot of affluent parents had more library books than, say, a title school. So how are we doing on that? Because if that's really the thing, if the people in Atlantic are right, that these kids need to just love reading, we need library books.
Okay, so I will just say, and maybe in our director discussion, you can hear us talk additionally. I will just say that one of the questions I'd asked on Monday, the one about qualitatively understanding where how to contextualize what looks like improvements year over year or semester over semester, how to understand that qualitatively in light of the pandemic. I'm not sure where that's answered, and maybe you guys can direct me later. But in our director discussion, I was planning to talk about opportunities as we look forward to a future session coming up in about a month. So anyway, okay, so I think that's it. I want to return now to our board business. So thank you. I think that takes us at this time to 5.1. We have from our executive director several items under board business. They include policies that we discussed on Monday and are now here for first reading, and the policy memo. So let me know how you'd like to go forward. Executive Director Harrison, if you want to give a high level of the memo, that's fine, but we did read it. It's attached. We heard you present on it. So perhaps the better use of the time is to focus on the other two things, but I leave that to you.
Yes, I would agree. Nothing has changed in that policy memo other than a few minor grammatical errors, et cetera. So I think that would be great just to start with the changes to the draft first reading policies that you saw on Monday. So which I'm happy to start with whatever policy you choose, President Serafan.
I think I would go ahead and I think we have it as sustainability first, and then we can go to student well-being. I think the value of that is only that we will then be going to the resolution on student well-being, and so we could have a connected discussion or contextually continuous discussion. So I'll probably leave it as it was proposed.
Sounds great. So Jess, if you could pull up the marked up version of policy 6811 sustainability, I would appreciate it. And so just to explain what you're looking at there, anything that's marked up that's in a different color or struck are the changes since Monday. So those are all changes based on your feedback and a little bit of additional feedback from Dr. Aramaki. I think I'll just hit the significant ones under the 4 pillars with respect to district facilities. There was a really excellent suggestion from Vice President Shuey around the choice that we make in using or not using or choosing not to use certain products, goods, and services. So that is new language in item D under the first pillar, district facilities. And then moving down to the third pillar, collective understanding, you see creators of the future world being struck. And the reason for that was a suggestion from Dr. Aramaki that as we enter the planning stage of the next strategic plan, that we may want to leave that language more vague depending on the outcomes of that process, and not have to maybe go back and fix wording in a policy. That also appears in student voice number 4. And then there's some excellent additional language there around student expertise, elevating student agency by developing student expertise. And I believe that suggestion came from Director Watson. If we move down just to under implementation, and this is the key piece here. I think this policy is excellent. It sets a vision. It sets, an aspiration. It sets an outcome. But really what needs to happen is, of course, the implementation of that aspiration, the goal, and the outcome. And that really is going to be codified in procedure. But this implementation section basically suggests and requires certain things to be in that procedure when we develop it. And the first one is the most important one, in my opinion, and that's an action plan. We heard one of our students tonight talking about the kind of things that we could include in an action plan around actions and steps that are actually measured as we move forward. There was conversation about intent with when that begins. And so what I landed on was beginning with the 23-24 school year, the plan would begin, but that plan would be reviewed and updated annually so that it's a continuous evolving process that's subject to annual review. That procedure would also include a schedule for reducing impact and no language change there, a timeline for integrating sustainability into the curriculum. Of course, that would need to be determined in working with our teaching and learning department who leads that type of work. And then finally, we had a lot of conversation around community engagement. And we heard again tonight that we need that process to engage the community. That needs to be something that we do, that we co-construct, that we do with the community. And in order to become an ecologically sustainable district, we really need to ensure that we elevate the voice of students. And we heard again tonight, there's tremendous passion there from our students. So I'm looking forward to that work beginning. And further to that, and this is more of an ongoing basis, was this notion of a sustainability advisory group of stakeholders that would convene at least once a year and more if appropriate to provide input on the district sustainability action plan. So those were the changes that I made as a result of the great conversation on. Happy to answer any questions or take in additional feedback.
I think there's one that got missed and got changed into a already accepted thing that was a change. So when I proposed the creation of the advisory group, I also made a proposal up under student voice to recognize that we didn't want to just invite students to kind of have their say off to the side, but that it was important that we integrated our students into providing design, implementation, review, and revision on the sustainability work in collaboration with other stakeholders. And I think that last sentence got, it's not marked as added, but that was added from last time.
Can you, and that's, what number are we talking about?
Under student voice in section A, the last
Oh,
sentence.
section A, okay, let me go up.
Yeah, I added that sentence because I think it's important that in addition to this council, that we acknowledge that when we're engaging student voice, that students have opportunities to engage their voice in all sorts of different ways and in conjunction with work that others are doing so that they have both sets of opportunities.
Thank you for pointing that out, and that is accurate. That was a change that should be highlighted, and I promise I wasn't trying to take credit for language that I didn't include initially.
No, I just didn't want it to get missed as a change.
No, thank you.
Thanks.
You're absolutely accurate in that.
So I just want to make sure I'm noticing if there's a switching between screens. I don't see hands up. I was going to ask a question of, kind of revisit something with Deputy Superintendent DeVita, but I realize I'll be putting you on the spot, but I'm just going to ask you relating. We talked a bit about this in the meeting the other day. A long time ago, a year ago, about when I first raised this, I said, it seems like this would be the way to make this work is there's a high level policy, but then it's incumbent upon the district, the superintendent, the deputy superintendent to put together something every few years and tell us where we go. And then we talked about sort of that tension between having something every year, which would be really hard, but also having something, maybe it's every 2 years or it got changed to 3 years. Totally understand. And then I think we were all sort of talking about, I'd say all 5 of us had expressed in different ways, how do we have the right balance between, I'm going to use a dreaded word, agility, versus kind of being static. So I guess the question for you is, let's say we have a plan and it comes out in year 1, and then halfway between year 1 and year 4, when you'd have a new plan, something really amazing happens in terms of scientific discovery. We would expect that maybe that would come through in something that's quite operational in an addendum or something else, and that could be quickly switched out. We wouldn't need a whole new action plan. But do you have thoughts about how to balance sort of the desire not to spin up the whole thing every 6 months or every time there's a great discovery versus being able to be that agile?
So I haven't put together a process or anything around this. However, in these areas of sustainability where there is a significant amount of scientific research and developments happening on a regular basis, I believe it's prudent upon us to stay attuned to what is happening. Some things will have a longer implementation life cycle than others, and some will be dependent on funding availability and the priorities that we have. For example, purchasing electric buses right now, that is not a capital expense. It would have to come out of our general fund or we would have to run a separate levy for that. And so that would be something that we would want to talk about because it's not like an immediate thing that we could go and do. So I think it's important that we stay aware of what's going on and then figure out how do we build it into all of the other demands that we have on our system. But I wouldn't want to ignore those opportunities either because some of them may be like easily implementable and something that we should take advantage of immediately. But I think each one needs to be assessed for that.
Okay, I'm kind of also inferring from, I think, the great ideas of Director, Chu and Shui and others about bringing in, community engagement is we will, have that understanding, at least a starting point for it, as well as great input for what things we might not know for net new ideas. But sorry, Executive Director Harrison.
I mean, I think that's the beauty of, like you say, with an advisory group that's got their eye on the prize, so to speak. If there was something different or a change made, then, or, a need to bring that group together to look at that, we could do that. And maybe, the language should be on an annual basis. We could say something like at least an annual basis to ensure that agility is built into the process.
Thank you. Director Watson?
It's funny. So my question was just about that, that last sentence where it says it shall convene no less than once per school year. And I was just wondering if once was right or whether it should be twice, like once spring, fall.
It's funny you say that. When I drove over here today, and it wasn't a long drive, I'm feeling guilty since we're talking about sustainability. But when I drove over today, I realized, and you're going to see in a minute here in proposed policy 3112, a similar process, and the language there is at least twice per year more as needed. And I thought to myself, that's what we should have said here as well. So that's something that I thought of, and I would agree.
Yeah,
That it
the
would be
ones that I'd had, just to build on that, is like often somebody will sign up for something for an academic year, or maybe that is their plan. So if you start at the beginning of the year and you have a suggestion and you think, okay, when we revisit or close out, it would be at the end of the academic year, there could be a value of being able to track that. So that's at least,
Agreed.
I see other hands up too, and I think next we have Director Aris and then Director Chu.
Yeah, I want to follow up on the ask on Monday, which is that I'd love the adjustments and the edits that we made. If we could create an opportunity for our high school students who are engaged in whether it's civic class or other classes, especially with our global competency push, to make sure that we, have them have the opportunity to read this version, our latest version, and see if there's any additional input that they could give us that we're just not seeing.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's, between first and second reading and being out a month, there is that opportunity. I know Mr. Litzenberger, one of our wonderful educators, was, in communication with me. Hey, John, what are the updates so I can share with the students? So that's in process, and that's kind of the intent. And a little bit further to that, I think the opportunity when we start to frame up what does the community engagement look like, that's one of the things I don't want to assume what the process for student voice looks like without talking to the students about what they see as student voice. Because you may recall we talked about the potential of a students advisory group, and I think those are the things that we need to talk with the students before we codify something in a procedure. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So since he's here, I'm just curious. I mean, we're getting, I would say, a little bit of mixed messages in terms of, or giving them, on the one hand, the climate is not going to get cooler. So I think there is a sense of urgency. On the other hand, I think it's a great call out by Director Aris. Like, we trust that Mr. Litzenberger has several classes looking in that, and so have other classes. But it'd be great if we could find a way to socialize this across all of our high schools and middle schools and have this be a conversation point that's both relevant for civics and
We
for
have that. I think we've got that opportunity in the next month. So absolutely.
Yeah, I would like to make sure that including our robotics kids who showed up today saying they'd like to be part of this. So I think there's a lot of interest that I want to make sure we capture all of that.
Thank you for that.
Director Chu, I think you're next.
Yeah, so I agree with the change to twice a year. I did want to note that on the bottom of this policy, there was some text that was deleted that I don't know if we want to delete, and I did want to raise it. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to scroll down, having a little trouble here. Oh, because I was trying to scroll your screen. Thanks. Right there in number 4 there. The district sustainability action plan, to provide input on that. I actually think that the beauty of such a council might extend beyond the action plan, like the action plan and other, and other relevant work, because they may find something that wasn't considered, something may come up that is topical. And so I would prefer that be left more expansive. I don't need to write the text for it, but if there's a way to leave that a little more expansive, I would encourage that. And the second thing I want to call out is we had a sort of discussion debate about the balance between where do we engage the community, to what extent, policy versus procedure. And what I've heard is let's just pass these policies so that we can get them done, and then we'll hear from the students. And I think I'd like to push back a little bit on that, but still keep it something that is meaningful and is scalable, so is manageable. And I think that our students have presented us an opportunity to engage our community differently than maybe we have thought about in the past. Maybe we don't have to run and be in charge of everything. Maybe one really interesting way
of engaging our community on this policy between first and second reading would be to give our students, to empower them and ask them, invite them to solicit feedback from our community at each of the schools that they're going, whether it's through a civics class, through the robotics organization. I know that the robotics teams are quite often willing to run, events for others and bring others in. Education is a core part of their work. But if we invited some of our students to do that in a way that was deeply inclusive and that helped students reach out to their families for input and that helped them reach out to their teachers and the school staff, that maybe the what portion of this work, the scope of it, could get a little more feedback from our community before we passed it. Maybe it's not as deep as we might have hoped, but it would be more than just passing it and then saying, okay, you just tell us how to do what we've decided to do. Let's make sure that that the what and the scope of the what is inclusive. So I don't know what the bandwidth is like, but I would like to leverage the willingness of our students to provide that input and not prescribe to them how that happens, but invite them to help us do that. I support that.
Director Watson? Thought your hand was up, sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, if there's anybody else has comment, let me know. All right, Vice President Shui, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to caution against spending so much time that we don't pass a policy that's needed now, yesterday, 5 years ago.
Okay, I think I'll offer my comment as the following. I do think there's a good opportunity between now and the second reading to ensure that students are, I would say, paying attention and offering input. But I have two thoughts. One, we have not done large scale community engagement for months for every first reading or second reading in the policy in the 5 years I've been here. We just haven't. And I think if we do that, we may end up, so depending on the policy and what we've already done, I would just say in this context, two things I just think are worth noting. When I just brought up the topic a year ago, I already got a lot of input or certainly a lot of push. Please don't wait and do more. And then there was petitions, and then there was input, and there was outreach, and then a policy was just proposed, not for reading, but just for an idea, October, and we got even more. So I don't think anywhere there's been, and I thought the kind of comprehensive approach that Randy Litzenberger took with other classes was actually the most comprehensive we've had in terms of getting student input for a policy, because it was cutting across civics classes and ecology-based classes. But having said that, I still think I like Director Aris and Chu's suggestion for making sure we have all the high schools or middle schools aware, with maybe a 4-week intense, like, give us your input. My concern is if we just keep pushing it out, I'm not sure that's the right message either. So I think a balance between the two.
Yeah, I would
makes
agree,
sense.
and I will strive to find that balance.
Okay, well, I'd like to go on to the student well-being policy. Did want to let directors know, I think Ms. Worth re-emailed us the links because I think we found people might be working in different documents. One board director pointed that out, so I asked her to resend it. It should be in your emails in case I'm just looking at what was posted online. I'm not in the active document, but I thought I'd let for other people know.
And that's a really good point. I just want to take this opportunity, since you made that point, that you've got the Ms. Worth sent that link, feedback, individual feedback to me between now and the Wednesday before the next school board meeting. So you've got about 2 weeks, and I'll put this in tomorrow's update. Would be much appreciated. So I will do that in your update tomorrow, and you've got those links to work from. So the next one, a little more complicated, is 3112, and I mean complicated in that there are more changes in this one to draw your attention to than 6811. So Jess, if you could pull up the marked version of 3112 and make it a little larger would be great.
Can I know, are these edits yours based on kind of feedback you got, or?
Yes.
Because I looked at it early and then haven't looked at it since now, so I'm looking at what I see
Yeah, so
posted.
I'll explain that. So anything that you see that's new language that's marked up, and some of it is highlighted and some of it is not. The reason being is if it's not highlighted, sorry, yeah, the marked up sections, new words, strike throughs, that kind of thing that is not highlighted, that was changes that were made as a result of the conversation on Monday. The information that's highlighted in yellow is additional information that I received independently after that. So I've highlighted it because I knew that that none of you would have seen this language if you had looked at what had been posted earlier in the week. So let me explain why that is, and I'll walk you through those changes. So the first change I want to draw your attention to is the title. What you saw on Monday was titled Student Wellbeing. One of the big pieces of feedback that really resonated with me is that the what you saw on Monday wasn't really about student well-being. It was really about social emotional learning and social emotional learning climate. So I was thinking that, maybe easiest thing to do is change the title, but that's really good information on student well-being. It's an area that we've focused on in this district. It's an area of pride, and student well-being is an outcome of a good social emotional climate and solid social emotional learning curriculum and instruction. So when I got additional feedback about specifically student well-being and safety from Director Chu, I thought, okay, this is really good. I'm kind of coming around to more of an omnibus approach here. So the title that I'm suggesting now is Social Emotional Climate and Student Well-Being. The language that you see in yellow that you did not hear on Monday, and you may not have seen if you looked at the original at the document that was posted earlier in the week, is really specific to student well-being and safety. So for example, I'll walk you now through all of the changes. The first change that you see in addition to the title is in the first paragraph. A new sentence there that says that states our commitment to the well-being and safety of our students, and that all students deserve an environment that supports and nurtures their well-being. And then a little bit further, this commitment includes specifically supporting students holistically in their learning and growth, social emotional learning, recognizing students' sense of safety and well-being is impacted by the experience, by how students experience their learning and the people that surround them. It includes the provision of social emotional learning and mental health support at all grade levels. It includes partnering with community organizations to provide additional mental and physical health resources. And it includes prioritizing our building safety and security in order to establish safe learning environments. And moving along under nurturing a positive social emotional climate, an additional paragraph that speaks to facility design and safety protocols. That's the safety piece, and ensuring that we invest in collaborative relationships with first responder agencies, et cetera. So that was a new section. Moving down to where it says engaging stakeholders and developing a framework, there was a really good suggestion that what you saw on Monday was kind of chunky, and that titles for sections would be advantageous. So there's a new section entitled Engaging Stakeholders and Developing a Framework. some minor grammatical changes, but the last sentence is key here, and it's parallel to the previous policy we just discussed, and it's around community engagement. Community engagement must reflect and honor the diversity of our community and the multiple perspectives that our community brings and center student voice. Superintendent shall create and maintain an advisory group of stakeholders that shall convene no less than twice per school year and more if appropriate. This group will provide feedback and recommendations on student well-being and safety in our district and advisement to the superintendent board when considering revisions to policies related to student well-being and safety. And then the final thing that I want to point out before I take any questions or additional feedback is you'll notice in the cross references a practice that we've started to do with all new policies and revisions to policy is to link cross references, whether they be policy cross references or legal references, so that if somebody was interested in the RCW, they can click and read to their heart's content. So, President Serafan, happy to answer any questions that I can or accept additional feedback.
Okay, I'm going to go based on whose hand is up. So, does anybody want to start us off? Okay, Vice President Shuey.
Thanks. I did ask for a clarification by putting a comment in. If you scroll up a bit, because there's one bullet point that is, there's some sort of error in the sentence. That second bullet point. So thank you for also showing the comments for those who are online. I'm really proud and excited to say, all in the same document and able to work on changes and express our views more real time and more efficiently. So that's exciting. And thank you to Executive Director Harrison for facilitating that. So I put a comment there on that second bullet point. And if I can better understand what that, recognizing that student sense of safety and well-being is impacted by how they experience learning. Is it from or the people that surround them? What is the intent of that and meaning of that bullet point? And you don't have to answer right there, but that would be helpful with respect to that bullet point. And then more generally, just to talk about what we talked about on Monday, or what I said on Monday. We talk a lot about supporting each and every student, and we talk about all students deserving a safe environment. I would like to see integrating the concept of when there are competing interests between different demographic groups, how we resolve that. So if a group, for example, says that they feel more safe this way, and another group says that they feel safer a different way, when those take us in divergent directions, how do we resolve that? And I would propose and recommend that part of that analysis and how to resolve it, because that's where the hard work is done, right? It's when there are competing interests. I would recommend that we really consider legacy, racism, sexism, all of the isms that have led to marginalization and underrepresentation of groups. And so how we integrate that, I don't have a specific recommendation for, but I'd like to just continue to surface that it's all good, well and good to have a policy that says student well-being, and we can all agree on that, but we should, in my view, have more direction on where to go when there are apparent competing interests.
Joyce, just a quick comment on that. I don't have a suggestion right now at this moment for this policy, but when we get to the resolution about safety and well-being, I did include more about that particular piece, and maybe when we have that conversation, we can port some of where we get to back into this policy for second reading.
Fantastic, thank you.
And I would say, and I understand your point, Vice President Shu, and it's an excellent point. And I think we just need to, I mean, we have an opportunity because this is a new policy, right? It's an opportunity, but I think we need to be open to, as we implement and we move forward. I mean, this is not new work for us, but we keep how our practices and our policies and our programs impact students, and that we when they're impacting students negatively, that we respond. So I think we need to be, and that's one of the nice things about procedures is that they can be there. We can make changes that if we need to address like, a dichotomy like you're talking about in procedure, we can do that, relatively quickly. And I think we need to be careful in the language that we use so that we don't set up something that inadvertently causes that kind of dichotomy that plays out in our schoolhouses.
Thanks. I will just say that contextualizing principles is appropriate to put in policy. If we believe that there are certain principles that should be honored when the procedures come out, then I do think that we should consider putting them in the policy, because otherwise we don't have the same kind of oversight over the procedures intentionally. And if we've got a philosophical perspective, then I do think we should consider putting it in the policy. I get the point that we have flexibility in the procedure, but I also want to say that there are some things that we want to take a stand on in the policy. Thanks.
I agree with actually what both Director Chu and Vice President Shui just said. Pulling, as we go to our next discussion, maybe seeing what elements can be
Absolutely
pulled in.
Yep.
I do have a question that's maybe to you and possibly our general counsel, but I think my original comment to Director Chu was, I like this, but when I looked up the WASDA policy too, I was like, that feels like this is about climate, and there's so much more that you have in your resolution that's pretty robust on well-being. So I actually think it's nice to have the two in one place. The only question I have is, I know in the past we've been kind of told, hey, when there's a model or requirement WASDA policy, keep it as it is. I'll say don't mess with it. And if you're going to do something net new, make that net new a separate policy. So I didn't know, by frankly saying, hey, bring it all in one place, if that's in contradiction with that general principle, or if it's fine. Like intellectually, it's nice to go to one place and have it addressed rather than a series of policies we would reference.
Correct. And I don't think it's contradictory. I mean, initially I came around to the idea, then I started to really appreciate the idea. What the legislation requires is that that there be a framework for social emotional climate and learning that's aligned with evidence-based practices and the Washington State social emotional learning standards, benchmarks, indicators, and principles. So that content is required to be in a specific social emotional climate well-being policy, or that it could occur, that could happen in another existing policy. So I believe that we are in compliance with the legislation, and if General Counsel McMinney has anything else to offer, I think that we're in good shape here.
Okay, I think we're going to take that as a good thing. I think, yeah, I believe you're next. Thank you.
Or I was just going to say, I thought the purpose of that alignment with the WASDA was for maintenance. So if they come up with a change in whatever they had in their model, so is that, I mean, that I don't mind doing it this way. I'm just double checking about the future maintenance of the policy.
And the good news is the original draft that you saw on the first reading draft you saw in December, it was based on WASDA language. And so the elements of the WASDA model policy titled social emotional climate is all here. We've just got additional language that, again, I've come around to the place that strengthens it. And it's, I think I like it personally.
Okay, so it won't be hard if they make a change to find. Okay.
I think Director Chu?
Yeah, just a couple quick things. Yes, Carolyn, that was the motivation, at least in our district a few years ago, for pushing to retain the model policies when we needed to. Like if we just started wordsmithing for the sake of preference, we tried to stop ourselves and say, you know what, like, if we're going to try to maintain these, WASDA does a good job of doing that. But when it's substantive, we've chosen to deviate. And sometimes WASD is leading with their model policies. And frankly, sometimes districts are leading. And one of the places where I think we've started to lead, and I think we have some opportunities to continue to lead, is moving things like our discipline policies away from being punitive centric and offender centric, and being more about behavior management and support of all students. And we started to do that when we changed some of the language recently, and I think we've got another couple opportunities. So there are places, and I think this is another good example of a place where they saw a narrow piece and we recognize, like, we've been a leader on this. In fact, Director Serafan worked with me a few years ago on a policy, a comprehensive school safety and well-being position for WASDA. And we have believed for years how important it is that we consider safety and well-being comprehensively. And so I think we want to keep that in our policy. There are a few things that got left out on this. I tried to port some of the pieces from the resolution space into this space so we would have something more comprehensive to talk about tonight. There are a few things that didn't come over, and maybe they could. A lot of the motivation for me doing this was not only based on it being the right thing, but talking to incoming Superintendent Aramaki. We had a long conversation about these and what was important, and he felt like reflecting that here was important as well. So that's why I took the time to do it, so we could talk about it tonight. But when we get to the resolution, if there are other pieces that you see that might be worth porting, I think that our commitment to, we have made a commitment to providing social emotional learning for all grade levels, and we have provided a commitment to ensuring our students have access to mental health resources, whether they be provided by us or that we are able through our counselors and other staff to connect kids to those resources and community groups and so forth. And I think there's some of those commitments that we might want to consider putting in our commitment in this policy as to what we expect. But we have to be careful not to get overly prescriptive about like how we take care of mental health and well-being and social emotional health. So when we get, I just want to raise those as a couple of possibilities for things that maybe could also come in here, and we can think about that. But I appreciate that multiple staff sent feedback on this, and I tried to work with John to get it in here.
Thank you.
Director Ars, did you have your hand up or was it legacy?
No, it's not legacy. I like the new addition, but I also like to move into our resolution and see if there's any additional stuff that we could get through our discussion, we could add or emphasize in this. I do want to support the idea of making sure that we are not unintentionally forgetting about the isms that impact our kids, and that Joyce had brought up. I think it's important that we keep that in the forefront of our mind as we move forward in this.
Okay, I'm wondering, it seems like it's a good time to go to our, oh, my hand was up, sorry. I think it's a good time to go to the resolution, which is, oh. You're right, thank you. So we are going to take a 10-minute break and return at, I'll say 6:30 p.m. Thank you.
Hey, hi. I just went on break so I can actually answer the phone.
Hey, Jess, can you let me know when you're ready? Okay, we're returning from our break and we now go to, actually, it should be item, I think that what's showing is not quite right. We're going to go to what the board business item that has the resolutions. So I think it's listed as adoption. I'm not sure if there's going to be readiness for adoption. It should have been maybe written a little differently, but we're going to certainly do discussion. So Director Chu.
Thanks. It looks like you want to start with the safety and well-being. I was actually hoping to start with the other one first.
That's fine. I mean, just Hannah can pull up the other one.
Okay, great. So we've got a couple of resolutions here, and I'll give the background on both of them at the same time so we don't go through it twice.
Oh, I should just say at the beginning, so we added 15 minutes, but where we are time-wise is we have I went ahead and put 30 minutes for the two resolutions. Doing the math, that would leave 30 for our director discussion if we stay on time. So I mentioned that to folks so that we factor that in. It may be that we want to use our full 30 minutes for this, and then we have our 30 minutes for director discussion, but it's just something for everybody to keep in mind. But go ahead.
All right, so the motivation here is there are two items here that we're going to look at. One is the deeper stakeholder engagement and accountability, and really you could call it deeper engagement and communications and accountability to equity. In watching us struggle through different processes and not be on the same page as to what our expectations are, the wonder is, do we need a whole bunch of new tools? Are we having trouble figuring out what it means to do the tools that we have? How can we support one another and lean into each other to do a better job executing in a way that prioritizes community engagement, like the voices of our stakeholders, communications, and equity in the work that we do? So I put together something that sort of acknowledges a few things. And then the second resolution that we're going to look at is another place where I think our communications, like not our official communications, but the way we as a district overall, all of us, including the board, have communicated about some issues recently, has brought to mind that we are not always working actively towards a common solution and recognizing the extent to which we actually share a problem space and share an opinion on set of solutions. We're just looking at the one point of difference. And so safety and well-being of our students is paramount, and our community. And so Director Aris and I put together a while back a draft resolution on safety and well-being, and we've since modified that to try to put things together in a more in a way that makes a little more sense and helps us have a way to move forward. So we'll look at this student safety and well-being recommitment. You'll see a section. I'm not going to read this line by line, but what you're going to see here is a section that talks about our shared commitment. We are committed. Sorry, not safety and well-being. To stakeholder engagement. We are, as a district, committed to recognizing our students as active learners. We are committed to our district values, including collaboration. We do have a policy on equity and accountability, and it does require everything from stakeholder engagement from the start to monitoring, to risk mitigation, to reflection. And so once you kind of put that on the table, we can acknowledge that we've also struggled to apply that in a way that fully integrates into the breadth of our work. So we've missed out on things. We can also acknowledge that integrating that critical criteria into the core work of our district isn't going to be easy. And we need to acknowledge that it's going to take iteration and collaboration to establish a shared understanding. We can also acknowledge that shared communication is not just about communicating in any one phase. It's really about embedding communication right from the creation of our projects. And we have, as a district, been able to employ successful interest-based strategies in our negotiations and collaboration with labor organizations, but also just how we're doing our work. And we can acknowledge all of our stakeholders are bringing something to the table, and all of our stakeholders, especially across our entire staff and board, have a role to play in communication. So the things that I'm hoping that we will resolve to do are supporting our superintendent to collaborate and kind of establish to improve the critical criteria work with a view to communication, engagement, and decision-making, to recognize that this is going to be unique in each application and we're still growing and we want to support each other. Support the superintendent in the upcoming projects, like making sure that we apply our critical criteria in the upcoming projects, and that we acknowledge that it will be evolving and it will look unique, and that these involve some of our biggest projects listed here. Work with the superintendent to either construct a communications policy or somehow articulate a shared set of what our culture of communication wants to be across our district. And then I also propose that this is a great opportunity for us to commit to bringing students onto our board and being more intentional and more active about creating opportunities for students to engage with us. And then finally, just really committing to getting more opportunities for engagement together and making sure that those opportunities for engagement are integrated into our work and that people can see the impact of their engagement on the work that's done, and that we're talking about it and elevating it. So that's this one. I'd love to get feedback. I think passing it sooner than later is a good thing, but I think tonight feedback is great. And yeah.
Okay, I want to see, I'm going to ask Vice President Shuey, Director Watson, would either of you like to kick this off? Okay, I'm happy to give my thoughts. I think on this one,
Oh, Seema, before you go, I also just wanted to acknowledge that Dr. Aramaki spent quite a while going through this with me, and we worked together to make sure that that we acknowledged a lot of the pieces of how important it would be to give space for us to evolve and grow this process and to support each other in this work. So that was part of the changes that I made from Monday to today.
okay, so I think, first of all, I always, I like the discussion for sure on stakeholder engagement. As I read the resolution, I see a lot of references appropriately to the critical criteria. I think the two things that I had, and I decided not to put line edits because I thought this was a good starting point, was a broader discussion, was first that I believe the Equity Advisory and Advocacy Collaborative has been working on, I think that's the EAC. I think that's the right, I have the right name for it. I thought they were working and we're going to come back in April with some specifics on the critical criteria. And I thought it could, I guess one thought I had, and I thought if I wrote the comment, it might come across in ways unintended, but that it could actually be ironic in a, in the sense of, you mentioned how community members are tired of giving advice and not necessarily having it respected, or giving the same advice again and again and not feeling that it's really landing with a real change. I'm concerned about having asked the EAC to work on something and maybe getting ahead of just giving them the chance to get back to us and be able to process that and respect it. So that's one piece of feedback. The other was I thought this was in many ways something that we would be best to co-create with our newly selected superintendent at the end of April as a starting point, when we have a session about how we want to work together going forward. So I don't have a thought about like, oh, this resolution's not good, but rather I thought it might be more powerful and more, I would say, collaborative and strong if it follows those things. So that is my high level response, because I thought that would give us time to have a longer discussion. I know we also have a critical criteria discussion coming up in one of our study sessions. That's, I think, our second meeting in April. So I thought that would allow sort of layers of discussion before we actually get to a point of a resolution. And maybe by that point, the resolution might be more of a joint commitment rather than what feels like a little bit of a directive. So that was my, I guess, my high level feedback. And so I don't know if you want to respond to that, if anyone else wants to talk.
I have responses, but what I really want to do is encourage us to move away from hub and spoke and really like give everyone a chance to sort of comment on that so that we're all talking about it together.
Sure. So anybody else want to talk about that? Oh, sorry, Vice President Shui.
Yeah, I've got some procedural thoughts, but since Director Chu is asking for the substantive ones, and I'd like to just start with, I like the concept a lot. I think this is something that you raised in December. I thought at that time that it was especially time sensitive, because folks might recall that at the time we were faced with a lot of community members really concerned that armed police officers were going back into the schools imminently and wanted to.
Joyce?
Yeah.
Joyce, I just want to note, right now we're talking about the commitment to deeper stakeholder engagement resolution.
So the second one, not the first one.
Okay,
So,
great, thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Same principle of there are times when resolutions are really timely and urgent. And it's, so at that time in December, I thought that I probably would have leaned towards all else being equal and balancing, supporting and not caring as much about the sequence of things. So I said that I would not start with procedure, so that sort of was a roundabout way of accidentally starting with some of the procedural stuff. So let me move to substantive. I really like this, all the concepts in here. I do, if we can scroll down just so that we can look at the procedure 0130P area. I agree that we should, okay, move back up if you don't mind. Okay, great, right there. I want to better understand and talk through how this could be used. Like if we've got a situation where we feel like it is time sensitive to pass a policy, sometimes those are the times when you really need to the critical criteria review and not to omit them or bypass them. Other times it could end up militating against the populations that you want to serve. So I don't have a concrete solution here, but I just wanted to throw out that I wouldn't want this to stand in the way of some of the equity-driven policies that we might want to discuss. For example, sustainability policy, which I do think is fundamentally an equity issue. And so if we put something like this in, then how could it inadvertently negatively impact some of the work that we want to do? But that's just a substantive thought, since we're talking about, just our reaction to it. But overall, I like the concept a lot, and just want to make sure we're thinking about that. And then just quickly, I'll say on the procedural that I would like, because I don't see an urgency to this, I would like to better understand the community groups perspective and feel like we might be able to come up with a more integrated, supportive policy with integration of that, which, this is just a first, well, this is a resolution, I guess, but you said that that this was an opportunity to discuss more than, is that right, Director Chu, than a request for a vote today?
Well, yeah, I've been asked to keep it in that vein, and so I'm willing to do that. I find a sense of urgency about this right now because I think that we have really struggled, and we have a I see things like equity and critical criteria becoming weaponized in our district. And I think that that is highly unproductive. And I think that one of the things that this resolution can help us do is to begin to build community together around that work and to use the tools that we have to do it. And I think that if you look at the first part of the resolution, the resolves section, I don't know how this turned into bullet points. I guess somebody decided it should be bullet points. That the supporting the superintendent to collaboratively improve and elevate the integration of critical criteria. And then the second part of that is recognizing that that integration will be unique and that we are growing in this work as a broader community and will be most successful by supporting each other and evolving this work together. Us committing to do that now is actually not at odds with the fact that we have some groups who are already working to provide input. It's actually supporting the fact that we're trying to evolve that work. And I think having a recommitment to this space and also the resolution about working to include a student, a better student representation on our board that is more integrated into our regular work in different ways. That the combination of those two things are rather time sensitive, and they're things that I think do deserve some real attention in the very short term and not the long run, and not something that we sort of put together. I intentionally spent over an hour with Dr. Aramaki to make sure that this work would not be at odds with his coming in, but that it would complement, because he does have vision around the critical criteria. And what I didn't do is try to define what that would look like here, but more define the fact that we would commit to supporting him to do that and to developing that vision together. So, Joyce, if it were up to me, I'd prefer to pass this tonight, but I'm, willing to, because I think it's so important, willing to wait another meeting, make some edits, come back if that's the way to go. But I don't think this one, it's just, there's too much divisiveness building around some of these concepts because we don't have a shared understanding and we haven't fully committed to what we said we'd do in the first place. And we haven't fully leveraged the feedback our community has given us on multiple topics for multiple years. And that's very frustrating for them to see. And I think changing our commitment to not just be listening to our community, but to engaging them and working with them to do things sooner than later is an important thing. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
I just want to be clear. We could take a vote on this tonight, but I don't foresee voting for it. And not tonight, not in this form. I think more work needs to be done. For me, it's a little too long. And I hear what you're saying in terms of like, don't push it out like a full year, like, as we've, there's other things that have come and we've waited a long time to actually get to them or pass them. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting maybe the better thing we consider is we have information that we know a whole committee has been asked to go do, and to not, I think, factor that in and to not honor it is a missed opportunity and perhaps an unintended negative message. So what I suggest is if we are planning to get input from the EAC and it's forthcoming in April, and if we know we are going to be meeting also with our superintendent, our newly selected superintendent at the end of April, perhaps carrying this out the equivalent of 6 weeks would be an opportunity to be able to get the actual engagement from a committee that's been working on it, and ensure that this is reflective of this new moment in time of working with our new superintendent, all of us discussing it with them, and getting that input. So that's what I'm saying. And I think it also would give us, when we have that distillation of where we agree, we may be able to also write it into something that's, I would say, a little crisper. So that would be my feedback. But it's not that I'm looking at this and saying, I don't like these ideas. Many of the ideas are exactly what I think are spot on, including we've all talked in different ways about student voice. 100% we should be including that. But I'm just saying because critical criteria is referenced so much and it's ultimately about how we want it to be used, ironically, not to listen to the very, or get the feedback at least of the very advisory group that's been thinking about this might have an unintended impact that's not actually aligned with the point of this. So that is my feedback on this. And I think other hands are up, and I just want to take a look at who's. Sorry, Director Watson.
Yes, so I had a hard time kind of taking it all in because I wasn't quite sure what I got today, how that, what was different from what I got before, because I didn't have really enough time to sit with it. But as I was going through it, I was thinking it was just when you communicate, sometimes some things are easier to read than others, and this is got a lot of gray, and so what I was doing, and I am the one who put the bullets in, I was trying to make it more readable without changing your words. So when we get to that part where the board directs I was just like, wasn't going to number them on you because they're not necessarily the Bellevue School District Board of Directors they want to number them because that would make them ranked. But I wanted to say, these are some things. We're going to do this, 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 and this, just to make it more readable. That's why the bullets are there. And then I thought in the earlier part, which I didn't want to do without you, was I was wondering, but as I'm reading it, I'm going through and I'm trying to take it in. I'm trying to find the main point of each paragraph. So I wondered with just maybe bolding a word, this part, vision, and then we've got values, and then we've got collaboration, and then we've got our equity and the critical criteria, and just so it could be more readable and more digestible. I would also agree with the idea of, maybe editing it to tighten it up, because not everybody's paying attention. And if we want to use this as a way to communicate to people, we got to make it very easily digestible. But other than that, I am concerned if there's this committee working on this. I don't know the ins and outs of that, but it's something we need to consider so that we're not stepping on somebody's toes when they think that they're bringing something to us.
I don't know if that's something that Executive Director Harrison or someone else wants to speak to, the work of the EAC.
Sorry about that. Yeah, thank you. I have a couple thoughts about this. I think there's two things. One is just around whether or not a resolution is needed or the timing of the resolution in order to get this work to happen. And then the second is about the content of the actual resolution. And so I'll just make a couple comments about it. So I have asked Shamari Jones and John and others on the EAAC to help me think through how to do just what is in this, what Christine had talked about and what she had written into this resolution, which is the consistent, genuine, meaningful integration of the critical criteria into the core work of the district. And so what I would say is, so that is something, I mean, we did, Director Chu and we did talk for about an hour about this. And so a lot of what's in the resolution is kind of my heart for what I want to see for community engagement, for decision making, and the use of critical criteria. So that is 100% accurate. And I think I really love that idea of kind of collaboration between the board and the superintendent in order to get this work done. And so whether that's a resolution or a shared commitment, I'm not exactly sure. So this is kind of where my newness comes out, because I don't know what is the most beneficial. But what I would say is that this is really, really important to me. I think that the authentic integration of critical criteria into decision making is something that matters to me. And part of the central office kind of restructuring that is happening right now is going to include a reorganization of a program management office that works with our director of equity in order to bring kind of decision making and community engagement kind of in line with the critical criteria. And so that is something that all of those things are really important. So regarding the content of this resolution, Most of it, I really agree with, including the part about, elevating student voice through potentially providing spots on the school board. And Director Chu and I talked a little bit about kind of how we can do that in ways that improves how other districts have tried to do that, as well as if we want to do critical criteria work well, it requires a lot of engagement of people. And in order to not over tap people or to over engage people, because people do have limited time, there's that sentence or a section that talks about making sure that there's kind of that we're creating structures that allows us then to engage people well. So I agree with the content. It's very much where I want to lead moving forward. And then I'll just leave it to the board and maybe to Dr. Jarvis and your expertise around this, around whether it's a resolution or a shared commitment or the timing and things like that. So that part I'll leave up to you. But the content is something that I'm excited to lead towards with in collaboration with the board. And on I think it's May 4th that we're proposing. May 4th, we're proposing a work session with me and the board around.
Actually, it's the last week of April.
Oh,
I
is it the last week of
yeah,
April?
According to Ms. Worth, I think that's where we're converging.
I'm sorry, I think you're talking about two different things. One
Oh.
is a study session on critical criteria, and one is the session with Tom Alsbury.
Right. The one with Alsbury, I thought was the last week of April.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
And then
okay,
the critical criteria study session.
We have a draft proposal that
For study
has
session
been
for the-
circulated among staff, but has not yet been presented to the board.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we have a couple of sessions coming up where we can engage in this more as well, including the 4th, which is specifically on critical criteria.
I think Director Aris is next, and then I see Dr. Jarvis's hand is up, and then yours as well. Okay, so why don't you go ahead?
Okay. First of all, I want to say thank you, Dr. Aramaki, for putting your 2 cents into this, and also doing a collaborative work with your staff, with Shamari and I'm assuming I think I heard EAC as well, and John. I think your desire to harness all of that is very appreciated in a very quick turnaround. So I think it's fantastic that you're fully on board on this. I do want to reiterate I do agree with Director Chu that there is an urgency in this. I think, and where I find this urgency is in reflection of all of our work around a recent vote on consolidation, and as well as previous works. And I think the sooner we come to an agreement, and I think it is, the better it will be, so that we show our community how important their voices to us, as well as I see this as a resolution, and I understand there's a kind of conversation here between resolution and shared values. I hope that this is our board commitment. And this is how I saw it, as it was a board commitment to work in the shared work, not necessarily having everyone else dictate our commitment. So I saw this as more of us putting ourselves out there saying we're going to do better. So that's how I took it. I'm seeing that there's a different take or a different bent of trying to decide is this a commitment or resolution. But just kind of putting it out there. The other part is, I'm curious to know what other discussion you're talking. Sima, you mentioned earlier today that, or earlier in this discussion, that you'd like to have Dr. Aramaki in the thinking process of this. What else were you thinking?
Oh, when we did our board development in the fall, we talked about what study sessions we would have. And those study sessions included a variety of things that we said many of these could be done with our incoming superintendent. And one of them was critical criteria review discussion, and that was set for a study session. It was actually supposed to be more like March, April, but I think a lot of things got moved out in part because of consolidation. So what you were hearing me talk about with Ms. Worth was what date was that? I thought it was going to be the second meeting in April, but what I'm hearing is because staff needs to be available for that, I think it sounds like it's going to be the first meeting in May. That was what I was referring to.
Okay.
But I was separately referring also to EEAC's work.
I think both, that's good enough. Thank you. I think that work that's scheduled for us is great, and I think it's still on track. I don't think that is in conflict or that this needs to be delayed because of that. This is, I think, a statement that says we're going to do that. And that's just going deeper versus this is a stating that we will be engaging, we will be, and how important that is. I don't necessarily see needing to wait for that to commit.
Okay, I think Dr. Jarvis is next, and then, oh, okay, then Director Watson. Okay, Dr. Jarvis.
I guess 2 or 3 comments, and I'll try to take them to a fairly high conceptual level. The question of the urgency or the timing to me is a fairly significant question of what comes first. And I recognize that we've been working on the question of balanced governance, policy governance, what's the role of the board in terms of oversight, how do we do that? But in this transition period and in this where we haven't really clarified that part, I would just ask for consideration that actually comes before singular commitments that would say, for example, if the board starts to say, this is how we want it done. As a superintendent, I would say the how tends to usually fall in a superintendent's domain, and the vision of where we want to go is more of the board's domain. In this case, I think you've even identified any number of opportunities that we're going to have. I can call them opportunities, but challenges that face us. And so one of the issues I want to just identify is what I believe is the need to work on the board governance model and the board superintendent relation that flows in that model as far as what it represents and how we're going to proceed in Bellevue. A second piece is one that it kind of came up just a few minutes ago as Director Chu had talked about being careful that we weren't prescriptive in the policy that we were talking about. And I shared a comment during the break that in a policy, if we do get too prescriptive, it can be used by others as a something that goes beyond a commitment, but an actual prescription for an individual student and the liability for the district. So I want to be careful again in this one of that issue of how we make sure we end up where we want. I don't disagree on the concept, and Director Aris and I spent, I don't know, 90 minutes, 60 minutes talking about how we could agree to grow and learn. And I would put in, I guess, a perspective from my standpoint, both as a secretary of the board and as a superintendent, that this is it's a vision. It's something that's, as we've already demonstrated, doesn't happen quickly or easily. And while I understand the urgency of wanting to make a commitment, I want to be really careful that commitment doesn't translate into an override that loses along the way the ability of the staff and the district to learn from the very occasions. But as we hit something, for example, like the budget reduction, I'm not trying to look for an escape valve, but I'm trying to say I want to be really careful that in our vision and in our commitment to do it better and to learn better, that we haven't put ourselves in a position that if X doesn't happen, it's an immediate violation seen by somebody who's eager to hold us accountable even beyond our own ability to do that. So I guess I want to say I'm not looking for an out on that, but neither do I want to get boxed in to the point that there's a clear line when there isn't a clear line. So I think if I just leave it there, my question, my request would be to try to work through the policy governance, balanced governance, board governance, governance and superintendent relation as a very essence of how do we do this, and then have the commitment and the trust that we are working in the same place. And I hear Dr. Armaki's statement, and I don't believe there's any equivocation there. It's not looking for an out, but I would certainly urge a continuous, slow approach to we will learn and we will get better. But I don't think it comes out of a mandate that tomorrow you need to jump 3'6" and you can only jump 2'6". It has to be something significant, and so the urgency bothers me a little. A 5-page resolution makes me nervous as the superintendent, but mostly it's a matter of how do we do this together as we grow and recognize that the critical criteria has not been something that people could instantly know, instantly do it, and it didn't happen. Therefore, I would just argue as complex as we've seen it. So thank you.
Point
Okay,
of
I
order,
think
please. Point of
Yes,
order.
okay, Vice President Shui.
Yeah, we are now even past our time of original ending, so may I ask that we honor as closely as possible our revised time?
Okay, so let's, as a board, just decide, do we want to, we could use our remaining time for talking about this resolution. We can also talk about the next one and then have limited time for director discussion. I just want to collectively decide how we want to do
May
that.
I summarize what I've heard so we can just close on this one right now for now, and then people can decide if they want to pick up a larger discussion, but if I could just summarize what I heard.
Sure, as long as, yeah,
like
I did have
very
one thing that Dr. Jarvis said that I felt like I wanted to correct so that nobody thought that was my point of view. But go ahead.
Yeah, so what I hear on the feedback on this is first, there's a concern that there's some work being done by a community advisory group to our district that we want to make sure is not inconsistent, nor is it felt to be sidelined by this. As I mentioned, I actually think this is a statement of support for that work to be done, and Dr. Armaki didn't bring that up. So what I would propose is I'll follow up with our superintendent to feel like to sense out whether this is complementary or if there would be an opportunity and what that opportunity would be to reflect deeper voices. I continue to feel a sense of urgency about committing to this work. The second thing I heard is let's kind of tighten it up a bit. It's not 5 pages, it's 3. And we could certainly tighten it up a bit and clean up the language. I also heard
Can I ask on the tighten up, like, would you want edits? Like, I didn't want to take the liberty of just going in and editing your document. I thought, let's talk about it first. Okay.
And the third thing that I think is important that was said is just making sure, and I think that this is I'm turning more to Dr. Aramaki than to Dr. Jarvis because, as you pointed out, this is sort of like to set the stage, like where are we going? And Dr. Aramaki has been very clear that he has a vision for being able to utilize this tool that we have to evolve it and to use it as a unifying mechanism. So I want to make sure that there's nothing in here that would prevent him from doing that or that would make our district unfairly liable for some detail of process that is not a reasonable part of the evolution of how this works. So those are the 3 biggest things I heard. Tighten it up, make sure that there's nothing in here that prohibits, and really understand how the community group that has been an enormous asset to us over the past 6 years is going to contribute, and does this support their work, or do we need, how do we integrate with that? I think those are the three main things I've heard. I'd love to be able to take a look at that and come back to folks with a new proposal next time that reflects the answers to those questions. Did I miss anything key? And that would allow us to kind of close out here.
I don't think so. I will just, because if I go to correct, it'll just take more time. I would just say, because the critical criteria and the review are referenced so many times, and I think they're fundamental to the resolution. My point is basically, if that group comes back and says, hey, here's the ways that we think this should be revised, and that gives rise to us rethinking, hey, how could we change that critical criteria? I mean, 0130, 0130P. If we go back and if we've already got this underway as a resolution, it potentially feels like precipitous before we've heard from them. So it might be,
Yeah, I heard
you'll
you.
get
So
input,
as I said, I would
input
love
that
to
says,
to
go
work with that.
forward. This is actually helpful, but you might get the opposite. So that's what I'm mainly saying.
Can I just put in my 2 cents on that? I understand the concern of this preempting or creating a certain path forward work for critical criteria. I don't necessarily think it's one or the other. I think we could still pass this ahead of that time. And for whatever reason, in our brainstorming session or work study session that we find that there's something that we've missed, we could always come back and amend our resolution, or for that matter, acknowledge that we learned and make a new resolution. I don't necessarily think that that should stop us from saying, let's do this. So I would propose that we maybe allow time for director discussion and bring the second resolution to conversation at the next meeting, because there's not a particular item of urgency associated with it. I think it is really important, the safety and well-being, and I think there's some worthy places to discuss, but I wasn't clear what Joyce was saying about that. So if she has a different opinion, I'd be happy to change route.
I thought I heard Vice President Shuey just saying the clock is ticking. So that's what I interpreted. So if everyone else, since it was your resolution that was the second one to look at, your proposed one, if you want to carry that over till the next meeting, then I think we have essentially 18 minutes and we can use that across the 5 of us for director discussion.
Director Aris and I brought that second resolution together, and both
Okay.
of us are fine with moving it forward.
All right, thank you. All right, I'm just going to ask anybody whose hand is up, if you want to speak, tell me. If you don't, please, if you don't mind, put it down. We're going to now move then to director discussion. We will carry over the second resolution on safety and well-being to our next meeting. I would ask just maybe all of us, just because several of us mentioned it, there's such, I think, good content in the resolution on well-being, safety and well-being, to consider what elements, as we're also working on the second reading for the other policy, are there elements that make sense to carry over there? So that's something we could all be thinking about, because we kind of mentioned it here and on Monday. So just an idea.
And to draw in particular Director Shuey's attention to, there's one element there that I would love to make sure we get your feedback on, about how we position things to be against one another or to be diametrically opposed, and how we can do a better job of positioning things to be oriented to our.
You can learn a lot about someone from the ringtone. I'm just gonna say. Sorry, Dr. Jarvis, that's quite a ringtone.
Anyway, Joyce, it's regarding your sort of, SROs versus no SROs versus how are we going to keep everybody safe, and what does it mean to keep everyone safe? What's the way to put that on the table and have a discussion that's actually meaningful and isn't asking people to pit one person's cost against another, right? To actually say, what are the most productive ways to do this? And so that is, there was an attempt made by me to fold that in. Please take a look, and let's sort of evolve that together.
Okay, I'm going to suggest for director discussion that I start with Director Watson, only because I think you were going to talk a few times, and you got so I'm going to go ahead and suggest 3 minutes for each of us. Just it
All
helps.
right, well,
And if we don't want to use it, or we want to invite someone else into our time, go ahead. But
since I don't exactly know what I want to talk about, but I'm still thinking about what we were just talking about. I'm just going to give you 3 things I came up with that relate but aren't really part of that discussion. So I would just wanted to remind us that within 0130, we have something about, we were going to do a 5-year equity review. We were going to review all the policies for equity. So I'm going to put that like on everybody's radar. Number 2, I wanted to put again on everybody's radar the chart that is in that Director Harrison says he's going to put in the where are you going to put it in policy under procedure to 0200, right? Which is a chart that we had been using in the policy committee about what kind of policies require what level of community engagement. And my big example was always the employee cell phone policy probably didn't require a lot of community engagement, but and then the hierarchy that way, so you can kind of get a sense of it. So I wanted to put that on everybody's radar. And the third thing is, I just wanted to say, let's give Dr. Aramaki a chance, because I think he's seen, these policies, and he's going to kind of, I have great faith he's going to catch up to where we want to be around community engagement and critical criteria. So that's all. I had 3 thoughts I had from the previous discussion.
Anybody want to react to it, or do you want to just have your own time? Okay, why don't we just go, Vice President Shuey, do you want to go next and we'll just restart the clock?
Sure, thank you. Is there a clock visible? Because I didn't see a clock.
It's on the screen now.
Okay, I now
Yeah.
see it. Thank you. And may I, not eating into my time, but may I ask for subtitles to be changed, because I'd like to speak in Spanish for this director discussion. And if we could set the input language to Spanish and the subtitle language to English, that would be terrific. And ask anybody who is online who doesn't speak or understand Spanish to take a look at the subtitles. I think it's a good way to put folks also in the shoes of trying to, to read through subtitles that are sometimes not perfect.
Okay. Sure, I will. That's fine. So why don't I suggest we have someone else maybe go while we work on that to make sure it works well. Vice President Shuey, can you hear that?
Yes, I heard you say that.
Oh, that's a great point. Okay, so Ms. Worth, how long do we have until you think we're up and running? Okay, so just in time. All right, Vice President Shuey, you're next. And thank you, Director Chu, for reminding me of that. That would not have gone very well.
Sorry, I missed that. I didn't hear what happened in the room just then.
You didn't miss anything. Don't worry. Just my bright idea that went nowhere. So thank you.
Excelente. Buenas tardes. Durante mi tiempo en la Junta Escolar, he abogado por el acceso y la inclusión. Un avance importante ha sido cambiar nuestra cultura para apoyar la participación.
I think we need a second to make this work. So hang on with us.
I see that it was going in Spanish.
I think we're
rather
okay
than
now.
English.
I think we're going to restart you at 3 minutes and we're going to start over because what we could see was translating into Spanish. So go ahead.
Okay, and so the input language is Spanish now and the output language is English? It's great that we are working these out, so that's part of the
Yes,
process.
that's what we've gotten confirmation on.
Excelente. Buenas tardes. Durante mi tiempo en la Junta Escolar, he abogado por el acceso y la inclusión. Un avance importante ha sido cambiar nuestra cultura para apoyar la participación en línea. Por las muchas razones que he dicho en el pasado, acomodar diferentes métodos de participación trae más voces y más perspectivas y nos hace más fuertes. A pesar de no ser la norma y la presión de algunos para estar en persona o ser juzgado con dureza, A través de mi defensa, el liderazgo de la presidenta y el apoyo de otros, más personas podrán aportar sus ideas y perspectivas importantes en el futuro. Por ejemplo, los padres solteros, los que tienen problemas de movilidad, los que tienen desafíos de salud, los que tienen limitaciones de tiempo, como las personas que cuidan de los padres ancianos. Ahora toda la gente tiene una manera nueva, aceptada y apreciada para participar. Además, desde hace aproximadamente un año, hemos contado con traducción y subtítulos en nuestras reuniones. También he buscado y alentado los comentarios públicos en otros idiomas. Me complació que un científico de datos bilingüe en nuestra comunidad ofreció su tiempo para dar sus comentarios en chino. Fue un momento histórico como nuestro primer comentario público en otro idioma con subtítulos en inglés generados por inteligencia artificial. Gracias de nuevo a él. Esta noche es otro momento histórico. Mi español es limitado y tiene acento, yo sé, pero entrego mis comentarios en español por múltiples razones. Quería mostrar, valoramos las diferentes voces y los diferentes lenguajes. Abrazamos a las personas con acentos diferentes. Reconocemos el esfuerzo extra que necesita para comunicarse en un idioma no nativo. Hacemos espacio para todos. Espero alentar a todos los que deseen participar en los comentarios públicos o en la junta escolar como miembro de la junta en el futuro. Todas las voces son importantes. Gracias.
Well, that was certainly a great test of our translation. So I thought that was, I thought it was a pretty great test. So thank you.
Did it come through in English then? I see it in Spanish already.
Yeah.
Was that a quick
It
switch?
came through in English. I think Jess has just switched it back. So let's go to the next board director. I'll skip me. I'll go to Director Chu or Aris, and I'll come back to myself at the end, assuming we don't run out of time.
Okay, well, I'd like to take my 3 minutes to have a discussion amongst us about how we could, well, let me just take a pause here. So since our last special meeting and our voting, I've taken a lot of time to reflect to see what I could do as a better, do better as a board member to be more effective and impactful for our community. In that line of thinking, I started kind of going through all of the things that our structure, are there improvement in our structure of our communication? Is there, we as a board, not the communication department, but us as a board and our, which also includes the staff that we work with. How can we be better? And I brought this up with Dr. Jarvis about how we could change maybe our structure of our meetings to allow more discussion. And I have made some requests of possibly having more opportunity to get information during presentation so that we could continue, if there are conversations to be had, that we have it. I think the current structure right now limits us where we, as far as that fluidity, the idea of hearing the presentation, and I appreciate the Monday session where we get to, ask questions ahead of time. I do. I think that's a good component. But then I've watched over the year how we ask questions and then doesn't always get to the heart of, and then we ask a follow-up question, but then that's the end of it. There's no follow-up discussion because it's too far between and we have a lot of other things to cover. In addition, through this whole consolidation process. And I've stated at the last meeting during my statement that, I didn't get all the information that I wanted, partly because I don't always affirm everyone's statement because I feel like they're good questions and sometimes we just don't have enough time to even affirm. And so I assume that the questions that are shared are going to be captured and that we will get response for them, including, like, I think Carolyn gave lots of good questions that I was looking forward to getting the answers, but I didn't see, and I don't know, maybe she got it and rest of us didn't. But in any case, in the light of trying to create a better transparency and better dialogue and being open, I do like to challenge us and maybe think about restructuring our time, our meeting, and creating more opportunity for discussion, because I think if we had more of that along the process, we'd be in a better place when we did our vote.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind going next because I think a lot of the points you raised are things that I've been thinking about too. And I think I was looking forward to when we meet as a board to talk about a lot of things, including norms of how we run our meetings and what things we can do. I think for me, like, I think we had a history that had one sort of things that were optimized, and we may have gone the other way too much in terms of reports. So I hear what you're saying. I think I would say the observation from years past is sometimes we would end up having a report presented to us in person, like after we'd already read it. And what would end up happening is it felt like we would ask questions. The questions would be noted down. We would hear the answers maybe a meeting later. Sometimes they would be given in the meeting, but sometimes they were inadequate. And what ended up happening is we would run out the clock for board to be able to have just a little bit of open time. I think where we've gone is maybe too, I mean, I'll just talk to the Monday versus the Thursday. My view is also like, can we find something better where we ask our questions on Monday? The idea is supposed to be on Thursday, we get the answers. I was thinking as Executive Director Sanchez was speaking, I was thinking I wonder if we could have a chart or a table that goes into the report that shows the question and the answer or something so that at least we can track, because I'm not always sure where in, let's say, the report my question's answered. But I don't think this is something one or two of us should bring up on our own. I think if we all get, like, I was thinking that my time is scheduled now for Dr. Ellsbury for my one-to-one. I was thinking of bringing up a couple of these different things on what I've experienced and what I wanted to maybe think about together. So I just wanted to say, I affirm what you're saying. I think there are ways we can use our time better and differently, including, especially as we co-create a future process with Dr. Aramaki. What can we do that doesn't have what I think Dr. Jarvis has told us about no surprises and that feeling of people feeling put on the spot in a public meeting and not prepared for it. We don't want that, but we also, I think, do need a better direct line between our question and the answer and the opportunity to have that. And when you say discussion, it'll be helpful to hear when we talk together. Are you thinking more discussion between us and I would say superintendent executive team? Or are you feeling more like, right, well, we have the director discussion time, but it's more than I can tell you, it's factors of 40 to what we used to have, but it doesn't always work the way we would want. And so should we be building that into like the time for when we get a major report? Is that the right place? So I say yes, and we should talk about it.
Yeah, I think, just want to make a comment on the no surprise thing. Because I think I appreciate now that we don't want to put people on a spot and put them in a bad situation. And so I think we could come up with a language to allow some grace and excuse so that we're not putting people in a space where they feel uncomfortable. I think that's something we could have further discussion around, but I don't want to use that as an excuse to not have the discussions we should have.
I hear what you're saying. Like, don't have performative discussions that are not rigorous or deep because we're worried.
Correct.
I think what we're trying to avoid is there was a time when I think the feedback many of us were getting from staff is that they just felt that it felt it could feel at times confrontational.
Yeah,
So
I hear
we need to
that.
find that right balance.
I hear that, and I understand there's a history, and I understand that we need to move, be cautious about that. But I would like to, for us to not be held by that experience and use that as a crutch to prevent us from moving forward in a healthy manner. I think we need to evolve and find a better path than what we have right now.
Yeah, agreed.
Point
And
of
I think that we
order.
have a session. Yeah. Okay. Vice President Shui. Yeah, I know we're at our time. It's 7:30. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you. So I thought I'd asked before. I didn't see your hand up. Okay, go ahead, Director Chu. Go ahead.
Thanks. So I just wanted to remind everyone that there is a WASDA meeting, a WASDA regional meeting. And one of the things being discussed at that meeting, in addition to advocacy for special education funding, is going to be student representation. I will also make sure that John has, so that he can include it in his weekly update, a link to a page where WASDA has assembled all of the policies and from districts who have student representatives, and you can see different ways that those are done. But there will be a discussion and panel about that, and that meeting is next week on Wednesday evening at 6:30 in Shoreline. And if you can't make that one, there is one a few weeks later that will be held in the south end of the district. So I'll just make sure John has all that information and that folks can register for that. And the second point I just wanted to make was to the discussion that the two of you were last having. One of the things that WASDA also has been doing with its board meetings is really working to get away from the hub and spoke model, where each person is asking the staff something, and then like the staff and then the board, instead of talking to among itself and trying to like figure things out, they'll turn and ask a question to the staff rather than to ask each other and have that discussion. And so I think as we model that discussion, one important thing is ensuring that we are, with ourselves and our superintendent, of course, having a rich discussion and not just one thing. Because if you truly want to serve each and every student, it's not about who has the best opinion. It's about how to take into account the various understandings, experiences, and opinions of each of us and the staff and the superintendent and the community voices that are engaging with us, and trying to work together to make something that doesn't do harm and that does the most good. So that's it. I'm not gonna go over. I know we're short on time.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. And we are adjourned.
Thank you. Good night.